Chapter 15. I was glad when the summer holidays started. It meant I could spend most of the time with Iona at the loch. Rob and I had hardly spoken. I'd offered him £20 towards the bike computer that had broken in our fight, but he didn't take it. He said he wished he hadn't wasted his time picking a fight with a loser like me. I couldn't be bothered with him either. I did feel bad about Ewan though. Ewan had asked if he could fish on our loch, like he did each summer, but I put him off with some pure excuses. I didn't want to risk anyone seeing the ospreys. So Iona and I went to the treehouse most days. Dad and Graham had finished the house with Hamish's help. Boards and planks of wood had been nailed together to build up the sides, and the roof was made from a piece of corrugated iron from an old pig pen. There were big draughty gaps we had stuffed with sacking and tied with baler twine. Dad had put two stools next to a wide window with its wooden shutters that overlooked the loch and the mountains. He built a shelf and put in a big wooden trunk, which we used as a table and a store to keep our bird books and Iona's paints and notebooks. Graham camouflaged the sloping roof with old ivy and dead branches, so it looked almost impossible to see from the outside. It was perfect. I hauled myself up through the trapdoor into the treehouse. "Did you remember the drawing pins?" said Iona. "Yes," I said. "Better still, I've brought food. Mum made us some sandwiches. What do you want pins for, anyway?" Iona swept her hand around the treehouse. "We've got to decorate it," she said. "Make it ours." "With what?" I said. "I'm going to stick up some of the sketches I've done of the ospreys. Here," she said, handing me a wad of drawings. "This was when the chick was little." I looked at the drawing dated 19th of June. There was one scruffy chick sticking its head above the eyrie. It was only a couple of weeks old then. I remembered that day so clearly. It was the first time we'd actually got a glimpse of it. But we were also sad because we knew then that the other two eggs hadn't hatched. "I can't believe how much it's grown since then," I said. I pinned the picture up on the wooden walls of the treehouse next to a later picture of the chick being fed by Iris. "And this is the one I've done today," said Iona. She held up a new painting dated 2nd of August. It showed the chick stretching its wings. It was almost as big as its parents now, and there wasn't much room in the nest anymore when it flapped about. Its feathers were still a mottled cream and brown, and its eyes were deep amber, not yellow. "Look," said Iona, pointing out of the window. "It's having another go." We sat, looking out across the loch. The eyrie was bright in the late morning sunshine. I reached into my bag for my binoculars. "I thought you said you brought sandwiches," said Iona. "I'm starving." I threw her a packet of sandwiches, propped my elbows on the window ledge, and focused my binoculars on the eyrie. The chick stood on the edge of the eyrie, flapping its huge wings, testing the wind. It lifted slightly off the nest, hovering just above it. You could hear the call of one of its parents in another tree, encouraging it. "Go on," whispered Iona. It dropped onto the eyrie again, standing right on the very edge. Then, as if it had made up its mind, it spread its wings and launched up into the air, followed by a downwards plummet towards the loch. I held my breath. The chick beat its wings, flapping hard. It swooped up from the loch and flew in a wide arc up over the trees. Round and round it flew, above the woodland, flap, 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 with its big wings trying to keep airborne. We watched it try and land on a thin branch of a tree near the eyrie, but the branch bowed and bent beneath it. It took off again, flapping towards the eyrie this time. Its long, gangly legs were outstretched, and it wobbled in the air like a helicopter on a really windy day. It mistimed its landing, crashed into the nest, and then sat up, ruffling its feathers back into place. "Flying's the easy bit," I laughed. "It's the landing that's difficult." Iona smiled. "Time for a new picture," she said. She reached into the trunk for the box of art stuff. "Where'd you get all those paints?" I asked. She had more tins and pots than I'd ever seen her with before. "Mrs. Wicklow was cleaning out the art room and dropped them round for my birthday," she said. "I didn't know it was your birthday," I said. Well, it's next week, said Iona, but I couldn't wait to use the paints. Iona found a new sheet of paper and started sketching. I glanced at the picture. I thought she'd do one of the chicks' first flight, but instead she was drawing Iris on a tree on the other side of the loch. Hamish thinks she'll set off for Africa soon, said Iona. I looked across the loch where Iris sat in a tall dead tree. She was bright against the dark woodland. Iris always sits on that far tree now, doesn't she? I said. I think she looks sad, said Iona. She's a bird, I said. How can she look sad? Iona shrugged her shoulders and kept working at her picture. She does to me, said Iona. She knows she can't stay however much she wants to. She can't help it. She'll leave her chick and go. I laughed. She won't even think about it. Iona crumpled up her picture and flung it across the floor. She stormed down the hatch and away from the treehouse. Iona, I called, but she'd already disappeared into the trees. I caught up with her by the river. She was sitting on a stone, hunched over, digging her penknife into something in her hand. She'll be back, Iona, I said. Iona turned round. Tears streaked down her cheeks. Will she? The gold locket lay open in her palm. Deep scratches were cut into the photo of her mother's face. I sat down close beside her. Your ma will come back for you, Iona, I said. Iona snapped the locket shut, wiped the tears from her face. No, she said. She shook her head. She's never coming back for me. Chapter 16. I told Mum about Iona's birthday, and she insisted on making a cake. I told her not to fuss, but a week later we were sitting around the kitchen table singing Iona Happy Birthday and watching her blow out the candles on her cake. Did you make a wish? Said Mum. Iona nodded and cut the cake. The candles trailed their wisps of black smoke up into the air. Can't tell you what it is, or it won't come true, she said. She held up the first piece of cake. Who wants some? Hamish reached across the kitchen table. I'll have a piece, he said, in exchange for this. He handed Iona a parcel wrapped in shiny paper. For me, she said. She tore the wrapping open, her eyes shining. Wow, a book of birds of prey. Thanks, Hamish. And we've got you a little something, said Mum. Dad lifted out a large parcel from under the table. This is for you. We hope you like them. I've never had so many presents, said Iona. She unwrapped the parcel and opened the box inside. Thanks! I looked inside the box and almost choked. Mum had bought Iona a pair of pink walking boots with purple laces. Oh, they're really gross, I said. But Iona held the boots up, a huge grin on her face. I love them, she said. I really love them. Mum passed Iona some socks. These are for you too. Try the boots on, see if they fit. Iona pulled the socks on and slid her feet into the boots. Oh, they're perfect, she said. How did you know what size to get? Mum glanced at Dad and smiled. It was his idea, she said. He measured the footprints of your bare feet in the mud. Graham helped himself to a second piece of cake. Sorry I didn't get you anything, Iona. I tell you what, I'll treat you to a rally drive around the farm on the back of my quad bike. No, you won't, snapped Mum. Graham shoved the cake in his mouth and winked at Iona. Mum poured cups of tea and put some more cakes on the table. It's a shame your granddad couldn't come as well. Iona nodded, prodding at the sticky crumbs on her plate with a finger. He had things to do. I knew she didn't want Mum asking questions. Why don't you try on your new boots? I said. Can I? Asked Iona. Go on, smiled Dad. Why don't you and Callum go up the hill? I went to get my boots and followed Iona out into the yard. She's bouncing up and down in the spot, waiting for me. You don't really like them, do you? I said. They're pink. Iona walked on, balancing on the hardened ridges of mud. Pink's my favourite colour. I frowned at her. You never said. She laughed. You never asked. I gave her a shove into a sticky, muddy puddle and ran ahead. "Hey, watch it!" she shouted. "I don't want them getting dirty." We ran up the steepest part of the hill to the stone wall, running along the top of the edge of the field. The sun was hot on our backs, and we were out of breath when we reached the wall. Sheep were scattered across the ridge, dividing our farm from the valley beyond with the loch and the ospreys. Iona licked her finger and tried to rub the mud off one of her boots. "I wish it wasn't school next week," she said. "Me too," I said. "It would feel different back at school." I knew it would. "It's only the middle of August," said Iona. "When I was at school in London, the schools didn't go back until September." I picked up the small stones and tried flinging them as far as I could down the hill. "That's Scotland for you," I said. "You know what we should do before we go back to school?" said Iona. "What?" I turned to look at her. She had a huge grin on her face. "Stay a night in the treehouse." "Mum would never let me," I said. "Don't tell her," said Iona. "Grandad wouldn't notice me gone. We could both sneak out and meet there." I thought of sleeping in the treehouse in the darkness with all the noises of the night around us, waking up and seeing the dawn. We talked about it before, but never seriously. Now it seemed like the best idea. "All right," I said. "This Saturday, you on?" Iona smiled. "Don't come up until then," she said. "I have to get something ready for then. A surprise." "What?" I said. She laughed. "You'll just have to wait and see." I turned to head down the hill, but Iona called me back. "Callum," she said. I looked at her. "Today," she said. "All of it. It's been the best." I grinned at her. "Come on," I yelled. "I'll race you."